All right, as everybody knows, this past Friday, the 28th, spring practice started for our Clemson Tigers. They were on the field for the first time this past Friday. Prior to the very first practice, Dabo Swinney met with the media. He had a lot of opening comments about the teams, fielded some questions from reporters, and then I believe they got to go out and watch 7 periods of the first spring practice, which is a pretty significant portion of practice. Typically, they only get to see 3 or 4 periods, but they got to see the first 7 sessions of the first spring practice on Friday. Some of the comments coming out by media members were just the level of intensity that was out there at spring practice has been since day one, since Friday. There has been a renewed level of intensity with this coaching staff, with the players. There's just a palpable difference by those that have attended practice, right? Dabo went over some of the injuries. He also went over some of the position changes that have happened since we last heard from him. One of the ones that caught me off guard was obviously Noah Dixon, tight end for Clemson, is going to try his hand at the defensive end position this spring.
Marcus Dixon,
excuse me.
Yeah.
Heading over to defensive end for the spring, going to try his hand at it, see if he has any sort of natural talent. Dabo Swinney mentioned that and said that Marcus actually was the one that engaged the coaching staff about trying his hand at defensive end. Obviously, he can see that that's a very deep tight end room, and playing time will be hard to come by just with the emergence of the 2 guys last year, plus you got Bentiker coming in. There's just it's a very crowded room, right? Much like the wide receiver room. So he's going to try his hand at defensive end. Obviously, that's a position of need for Clemson. We went out and got Will Helt from the transfer portal because of the lack of quality depth there at the edge position. So going to be really interesting to see. I look forward to hearing some reports as we go further along in spring about Marcus Dixon and kind of how he's looking at the edge position. Obviously, we know also about Adam Randall, who's making the switch to running back. And he's going to get a ton of reps this spring at running back, especially with, some injuries in that position group. He's probably going to be a guy that gets a ton of reps out there to see what he can do at that position. So a couple of position changes there. Tink Kelly was the last one that he mentioned, who's going to get a lot more work at cornerback this spring instead of wide receiver. Obviously, Dabo said he's going to work both, but he pretty much already knows the wide receiver position. He already knows the offense really well. They really want to see if there's anything at cornerback that he can help the team with. So Tink Kelly going to be probably over with the defense for majority of spring practice. A couple days with offense, but majority be on the defensive side of the ball, getting some work at cornerback. So, Jordan, your thoughts initially on the position changes. Did any of them surprise you? What do you think about the moves by the guys? And do you think they're going to work out?
Yeah, I mean, on the Marcus Dixon transition, I mean, it's not something that, I was, thinking about necessarily, but it makes a lot of sense. He's been, he came in with Olsen Pat Henry, 2 years ago. So he's been in the program a little bit. It's just there hasn't been a whole lot of opportunity for playing time. He's more coming out of high school, he was definitely more of your traditional inline tight end, more of a blocker. I mean, he had some good receiving tape coming out, but just what he offered was not going to be the best fit for what Garrett Riley likes to do. And just with the experience and depth that you had at tight end, and you still have at tight end, and talent, especially, it just the path to playing time just didn't seem to be there. And so I think, especially with him initiating it, makes a lot of sense. I applaud him for trying that, because obviously the transfer portal was an option for him.
Right.
Still could be, obviously when the spring window rolls around. But for now, he's willing to stick it out. and give another position a shot. And he has the body type for it. I believe he played both ways in high school. So this is something that he might be able to transition and work out pretty well. So we'll kind of see, and I'll be interested to kind of hear some of the takeaways or some of the how he looks out there, because he certainly, from a body type standpoint, he definitely looks the part. Then you mentioned Tink Kelly. Making the transition from wide receiver. You saw him in some limited snaps last year at receiver, made a couple of catches. He played in limited snaps, and so it just, with everything that you have returning, but Marquez Henderson and Juju Preston coming in, the wide receiver room there's a lot of talent there, and it just. He's Tink Kelly coming out of high school. He's a guy that played. He was a 2-position player, played both ways, and that was what they liked. And liked about his game and what they brought him in for. And so they gave him a shot at wide receiver, but they want to see if he can offer something at corner, kind of bolster that cornerback depth group. That cornerback depth.
We heard from some players as well. Sammy Brown. We heard from Wade Woodaz talking about the addition of Tom Allen and the difference in intensity. And that's one of the things that I mentioned at the top that the media members really recognize. So if you guys know TigerNet, they got the Orange Crush podcast they do with Grayson Mann over there. And he said last year was obviously his first spring at Clemson, first spring working for TigerNet. And he had mentioned that last year it seemed kind of a little bit relaxed, lackadaisical, if you will, at spring practice. Not that guys weren't excited to be there, but there just wasn't the level of intensity that I guess he was expecting going in, being his first spring as a media member. And he mentioned that the marked difference between last year and this year and the level of intensity. And I think a lot of that has to do with the addition of Tom Allen, the addition of a guy like Ben Boulware, who we know is a super fiery guy as well. And there's just a renewed sense of urgency on that defensive side of the ball. I thought it was interesting that Wade Woodaz talked about Tom Allen the first time he walked into the meeting room. The first thing he said to the guys is, we're going to stop the run and we're going to tackle, right? That's what we're going to do. We're going to play with effort. We're going to stop the run, and we're going to tackle.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it really has just been the intensity in practices. That's just been something that's been noted by multiple people that were there, and just and obviously the players echoing that as well. There's just a different feel when with Tom Allen running the show, and then obviously the addition of Ben Boulware, taking a bigger role with the linebackers. Like it's more reminiscent. Like Wade Wood has even said, like, this was what I envisioned, playing under Brent Venables would have been like. Right. And that's what guys have told me. Like, this is like when BV was here. Mm-hmm. And so like, that's got obviously got to be music to your ears as a Clemson fan too. So and obviously Tom Allen spoke with the media today, and, it further cemented some of the things that we've discussed about the shortcomings of the previous iteration of the defensive coaching staff. And so like it is really, really refreshing.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, sometimes less is more, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes putting less on your athlete's plate and allowing them to just play free and play fast gets better results on the field. And that's really what a Tom Allen scheme is going to do. It's going to allow these guys to go out there, really understand what they're doing from a schematic standpoint, and just go out there and let it fly. And that's usually when good things happen. Both Sammy and Wade Wood has mentioned, wanting to run through a brick wall for Tom Allen, because he just brings that level of intensity. And then even Ben Boulware, Wade Wood was mentioning that he just knows how to get under his skin. He knows how to irritate him and get under his skin, which Wade Wood went on to say that is a good thing, that causes him to play with a lot more intensity and really focus in on what he's doing and being his best in that moment. So it sounds like their Tom Allen's transition has been pretty seamless. Dabo talked about how much of a the coaches have enjoyed having him around on the defensive staff, and that kind of just trickled down into the players. And I really think the product on the field will be a much improved product from what we saw last year.
I did want to, mention, talk about some of the things that, Tom Allen said today. John Sarian mentioned in the chat, he was kind of taking some shot, not intentional shots, but
Right.
just some criticisms of what this defense was. And kind of indirectly indicting, obviously our previous defensive coordinator. So like it's like he talked about, he not only watched games, he watched practices, and the number one thing that he saw that was missing from those practices and from those games was effort. That just it tells you everything you need to know. I mean, he was very upfront, and so like I can't even call it shots because he was just evaluating what he saw, and he's a guy that has seen what good defense looks like and has coached good defense. And what he saw last year was not good defense. What he said was, I know I'm here to fix this defense because we weren't flat out weren't a good defense.
But yeah, so lots of good stuff coming out of Clemson spring practice so far. A couple guys still coming back off of injury. Nobody that we haven't expected, or guys that are, I know Dabo talked about Jay Lou and he got a shoulder cleanup. Obviously, he was battling a bad shoulder all season. We knew that was going to happen. Isaiah Thurman still coming back from, or Elijah Thurman, excuse me, still coming back from that tightrope ankle surgery. But hopefully he'll get a little bit work later in the spring. Excited to see the steps that he takes forward. We did hear from a couple offensive linemen, Jordan, moving over to the offensive side of the ball before we wrap up our thoughts on the first couple spring practices. Heard from a couple guys and just, their goals for this year. I think it was Blake Miller who was asked, what's the offensive line as a whole, a group, what's their goal this year? And he was like, to be the best offensive line in college football. Right. So excited to see the next steps forward. Again, you got 4 returning starters. Matt Luke in his second year. You saw what he was able to do on that offensive line in year 1 under his tutelage. Expect another big step forward, I think, for that offensive line. You got Blake Miller and Tristan Lee opposite of each other, really good tackles. It's great to have those edge positions solidified along the offensive line. You got Ryan Lithicum coming back for his second year starting at the center position. And then, a mix of Harris Sewell, Elijah Thurman, and a bunch of other guys. Names are slipping my mind, but I'm excited to see the steps forward that this group takes and who those first 5 are to roll out there, right? Who's going to be those best 5 that we trot out there against LSU.
And we'll kind of see how that that continues to develop. And you mentioned it. I mean, who's going to slot in with Marcus Tate gone at left guard. Like that's another thing that we're closely watching. You mentioned Elijah Thurman. You've got Colin Sadler in the mix. Harris Sewell. Well, kind of those presumably are the 3 guys I would be looking at. That'll probably be in the competition. Just you got to play the best guy. But Matt Luke, you saw the strides that this group took last season. You return 4 or 5 starters. You have options to replace the one guy. So, I feel pretty good about where things are trending with with Matt Luke in charge. And like I said, you saw the strides last year. This group was miles better than they were in 2023. And now you have a senior, you have senior quarterback and they have a good rapport with him. And he's a potential Heisman candidate. Like there should be a lot of synergy and kind of and consistency there throughout spring practice. So I'm excited to see kind of how that starting 5 shakes out. But I think you you're in the best shape, at offensive line that you've been in quite some time.
Yes.